On today's episode of Money and Power, we talk about overpaid athletes, why Hawkeye is preachy, and hillbilly beards. But first, Kid Ink.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on? Yeah. Really ain't nothing I can drop that. Wake up in the morning, make it all okay. It's nothing to get it poppin'.
Welcome to episode 2 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. I'm your host, Nathan Martin, and joining me from Michigan is Rob Johnson, financial consultant and host of the Rob Talks Money podcast.
Howdy.
Also joining us from Ohio is Jeremiah Martin, a teacher, soldier, and an NFL ball rubber.
At least you got my name right. Hello.
All right. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about some awesome topics here. But first, we got a really interesting question from our favorite but not lone listener we've discovered, from Kevin Small, who had a topic request. Jeremiah?
Yeah, so Kevin Small says, topic request. Why do you think CEOs get vilified for what they make, but superstar athletes, big name actors, and top singers do not?
That's an interesting question. So we're going to kick this off talking about kind of economics of wages. And I'd like to throw a different wrinkle in here, Rob and Jeremiah, if you don't mind. We kind of have a meme buster segment, but this is kind of a larger discussion. All those memes that kind of say, X NFL, so-and-so NFL player makes so much, but we can't pay our teachers. You also see it about soldiers and sailors and service members. Basically, Rob, here's the question. Here's the main gist of the question. Why do people not understand compensation and the economics of compensation, and where does that come from? And let's spend some time kind of trying to talk through this and educating people on compensation.
Yeah, I think people understand compensation when it benefits themselves. For example, when I talk to people about this issue, I see a lot of people who are very demanding in that they say NFL players, they're overpaid. They make too much. All they do is they catch a ball. Basketball players, all they do is run up and down the court and shoot a ball. Why are they paid so much, but a soldier makes $40,000 a year? But when I turn it on them and I say, well, would you like me to dictate how much you make per year? They say, well, no. It's like, well, that's the market. You are paid a salary based on what you came to an agreement with your employer. The military is the same. The NFL is the same. It doesn't matter if the CEO of the company I work for makes $20 million and I make $20,000. It doesn't matter because I agreed to that. If I agreed to $10,000, that's what I agreed to. It's a personal contract between me and somebody else. So for someone to go and say, well, $20 million is too much, well, that's what the market's paying. You never want to be in a position where we can start dictating what other people make outside of our own area. It gets super dangerous. And that gets into, it's kind of a bastardized version of socialism, people dictating what other people make based on how they feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes even further than that. It goes to how much people really just don't understand how economics works.
Right.
So let's talk a little about that. So economics is how we are able to allocate scarce resources, right? So the essential elements of economics is how we allocate scarce resources, right? When we're talking about wages, obviously compensation is demanded at certain levels for certain talents, and there's a certain amount of resources that can be allocated across the board. So you obviously, if you have a profession that's a little more of a scarce resource itself, in other words, if not very many people can do what you do, you obviously are going to be able to get allocated to you a larger share of resources. If you do a job that is easily replaceable, then the resources going to you are going to be much less. So let's take this into the real world, right? So a quarterback in the NFL, there are only 32 starting quarterbacks in the entire world. And of those 32 starting quarterbacks, probably only about 8 are really highly proficient at what they do. Wouldn't you say, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are 8
Well,
people.
hold on. Yeah, highly proficient. Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are essentially 8 people on the entire planet that they can do what they do at an elite level, we'll say. To where if you were starting an NFL franchise, you would want one of those 8 guys, right? So if you were starting an NFL franchise, would you want, I'm talking about like the Aaron Rodgers, the Drew Brees, the Tom Brady's of the world, not like the Case Keenums of the world. No offense to Case Keenum. He's still making quite a bit of coin, right? But it's at the position, one of the most important positions, you're going to be paid significantly more. But even if you're an NFL player, you're not going to be making as much as what the quote unquote starting quarterback is. If let's say you're on special teams, or you're a second string linebacker on the team, right? So even in the NFL itself, there's a great disparity there amongst those resources. But that's just simple economics. If you're unhappy with the pay at your job, you have to think to yourself, what value am I adding to the company that nobody else can add?
Right.
And then negotiate your wages, that way. So that's, the bottom line is people just don't really understand the economics of the compensation. They're just coming from a place of, it's almost jealousy.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many facets that we could go into. We started off the conversation too, talking about, memes of, soldiers versus, versus NFL players or all-star athletes. This isn't a meme buster segment. This will go beyond just a singular meme. But I did pull up this one that I thought kind of discusses the point that we're getting at. There's this meme that says a man in a helmet defending his country should earn more than a man with a helmet defending a football. Simplified much.
Right.
There's so much misinformation out there. There's so much to be discussed in this topic. As we talked about last week in our meme busters, anytime you can condense your entire argument down to a singular sentence or a singular meme, there's probably going to be a lot of inaccuracy there. And I see that a lot in the discussion when it comes to our, military, for instance. Both Nathan and myself are veterans. And so, we'll probably still get flack no matter what we say, but at least we're coming from that perspective that we kind of understand that world. But when it comes to military compensation, at least, not to say that the United States government has it perfect, but what we're seeing right now, and me currently serving in the Army Reserves, what I'm seeing right now is that there's an influx of bonuses, reenlistment bonuses, extension bonuses, bonuses for different jobs. They're specifically incentivizing jobs that they don't have enough of and incentivizing people to stay in longer because they might not otherwise. And ultimately, it's going to go back to the market. There's a big difference in the military between 2003, 2004, and today. And so based on the need, based on the market, based on supply and demand, how many people out there are actually willing to put on that uniform and get it done is going to affect the pay, and it's going to affect the bonuses. It's going to affect the incentives and the benefits. And so what happens a lot of times is people on that end of the spectrum, they also look at the bare minimum. They look at the base pay. They don't look at all the other benefits, whether it be healthcare, whether it be lodging, whether it be et cetera, et cetera. And then they just look at the base pay and they say, oh, look, a private with 1 year in service makes $20,000 a year. It's like, well, that's not entirely accurate because there's a lot more that goes into that. But then on the flip side of that, they don't look at the economic value that is actually brought into a team, a city, a community, et cetera, when you have these professional athletes. You know, ultimately, these teams are not going to pay the athletes what they're not worth. They're not going to lose money on an athlete. They're getting paid that money because they bring that economic value to the team. And so there's so much just simplified language around this. And, you know, to Nathan's point, without really understanding the economics behind it.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring in the Bible here. But one of my favorite parables is the parable of the workers in the vineyard. You familiar with this, Rob? I'm sure.
A little bit.
All right, so I'm going to read from this. And so this is located in Matthew 21-16. And the reason I bring this up is because I see this argument about wages and fairness brought up a lot by kind of the social justice warriors in the congregation, right? And so there was a man that is a householder, went out early in the morning, and he hired some laborers in his vineyard. All right, and so he had agreed for these laborers for a penny a day. I guess that was minimum wage. I don't know. And he sent them into his vineyard. And then he went out the third hour. He saw some others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, hey, go into the vineyard, and I will give to you a penny a day as well. And then he went out again the 6th hour and the 9th hour, and he did likewise. All right, so we basically have 4 groups of laborers all working for a penny for the day, right? Not a problem until they all come in to get paid. And so the first people come in that get paid that went out for the 9th hour, he gives them a penny. I'm kind of paraphrasing. I'm not reading directly here. And the others assume that they're going to get more. And so when they had received it, they murmured against the good man of the house, saying, these last were running but 1 hour, and yet they made equal to us, which had borne the burden and the heat of the day. And we answered one of them and said, friend, I did you no wrong? Did you not agree with me for a penny? And take what thine is and go away. Because I will give unto this last unto thee, and it is not lawful for me to do what I will with my... Is it not lawful to do with what I will do with my own? In your eyes it is evil, because I am good. So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. And I think it's pretty interesting kind of story of the economics. And we see this in companies all the time, where someone gets hired in and they get a certain wage level, and then another employee comes in and they get hired in at a different level, right? And the first thing that comes to our mind, of course, isn't that we didn't negotiate properly or anything like that. It is simply like, well, there must be discrimination, right? There must be some outer reason why they were paid more than I was.
Surely it's not my fault.
Yeah. But you got a job. And that's important, right? And so I think it's always interesting to bring this up. One, it's amazing how many people aren't familiar with this story. But two, it just speaks to a fundamental truth that you can't look at somebody as evil because they're doing with what their resources as they wish.
Yeah, and I look at that parable, and so it's two things. So theologically, that the parable is talking about how whether you have been the meaning of that parable is whether you've been a Christian your entire life or you became a Christian at the end, it doesn't matter because of the salvation that God gives.
Right.
What I'm looking at from the economic perspective, and I see two sides. The first side is that sometimes there are instances where people are not in a position to be able to negotiate because it's the only game in town. I think that situation is far less prevalent than it used to be, largely because businesses have a lot more accountability nowadays because of transparency. Businesses, with the advent of the internet, now are subject to tons of reviews through Google, Facebook, Twitter, even Yelp back in the day, whereas before they weren't. So now we actually get to see the marketplace work in a more full manner because businesses are being held accountable because of what they're doing. And a good example of this is something like Costco. Now, Costco pays their employees far above a minimum wage because they see the value in that, because they have better employees, they have more long-term employees, they have less turnover and higher retention. All of that works out to their advantage because they're not paying to keep onboarding people.
Right.
Walmart, on the other hand, has, I forget the number of employees, I think it's like 2 million employees. And they have constant turnover, low retention. Now that they're having this transparency and people are complaining about the wages, they're starting to look and see, well, can we hire people at a higher rate and keep them longer? Because will that benefit us? And the answer is yes. So they're starting to see people in the market complaining, and they're starting to change because they see the benefit in that. So it's not that people are saying, and they are, some people are saying, well, everyone should pay $15 an hour. That's ridiculous. It's my business. I pay what I want. If you agree $2 an hour, that's your choice. But it's the market's job to say $2 an hour is not sufficient. You need to change that. And because of that, we're not going to shop there. We're not going to work there. Your business is going to go down. So this is actual Austrian economics at its finest, which is the economic philosophy I subscribe to, that a business rises and falls on its own merit based on the people in the marketplace. And I think that's exactly how the economic system in America is turning towards, dumping Keynesian economics, thank God, and embracing something that is actually more realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so I think that, we talked a little bit about how people don't understand basic economics. And I'm really glad you gave a little bit of a primer there. Because I also think that people don't understand really what the term capitalism means. And it doesn't just mean crony capitalism, right? So I don't think any of us, of the three of us, believe in cronyism. But we all believe in capitalism, though. But it's not to say that we think that there isn't cronyism that exists. And what cronyism does, it obviously puts things in place that don't allow the market to work. Very similar to if it was outside influences and regulation, right?
Well, but that's the irony, though, of the situation, though, is that in complaining about so-called crony capitalism, a lot of people's solution to that is more government interference, more government regulation, which lends itself to more cronyism.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. Yes. And so, I think, it's important for people to define their terms. So it's like, I'm with you. I'm more in the Austrian economic theory. I believe that, first of all, I don't believe that corporations are evil. I believe that in the long run, for a business to be successful, they have to ascribe to a certain virtue in the marketplace, because people won't shop there. People won't work there. People don't like to work for jerks, and people don't like to shop where jerks are. And as our virtues as a society change, obviously those kind of indicators kind of change. But it all comes from competition. So obviously, if you're the only store in town and you have a monopoly, that's a little bit dangerous. But I think that we're in a position where there's a lot of competition out there. And so, when we look at things like leadership and we look at virtue in the marketplace, I think it's important to understand that, short term, you could be an absolute scumbag in business and make money. Short term. But aside from cronyism and those injections in the marketplace, I don't believe, and maybe Rob, you think might be a little Pollyannic, but I don't believe you can be a scumbag in the marketplace and make it long term, unless there are other influences that prop you up outside the market.
I think that's true for the most part. The only area right now that I'm seeing monopolies come about and scumbags continuing to rule is in ISPs, internet service providers in rural areas. There has been a lack of competition for market in that area. And the second is something that I've railed a lot against is payday lending. That has been something that really nothing has rivaled to that people are creating monopolies off of, and it is a scumbag long-term business. But other than those two, I don't really see. On the majority, you're absolutely right.
Well, ISPs there's a lot of cronyism there.
For sure.
Well, and that was exactly my point. I think that's a perfect case in point, is that ISPs are a perfect example of, to fix the problem, you insert regulations that ultimately don't hurt the big guys. They hurt the little guys that are trying to inject themselves into the market and increase competition in those rural areas.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so a large part of that, and I think we need to have a whole new segment on this, but a large part of this is also like municipal broadband, and like local cities trying to do ISPs. And there's whole states that ban that practice, but the people that put those laws in place and lobby for those laws in place are the major telecoms, because it's more competition in the marketplace. So that's a whole nother topic on itself, as is payday lending as well. And I know that we've gone kind of back and forth amongst ourselves on that one too. So
yeah.
Any final kind of words of wisdom, Rob, on salaries? Like you obviously talk to a lot of people who are unhappy with their current financial situation. And so if I come to you, Rob, and I'm unhappy with my current financial situation, and I'm just like, they don't pay me what I'm worth. What kind of words of advice do you have for someone in that situation?
Yeah, so I've encountered that a couple of times. And the first thing is that when someone says they're not paying me what I'm worth, I ask them, well, why do you think that? Because there's two things that are going on. One, you either have poor leadership that doesn't recognize good talent, which is entirely possible. Or two, you have someone that is very conceited and self-centered, thinking that they do everything, but they really don't. And this comes back to self-awareness. Do you actually know what value you contribute to the company? And you put this well earlier when you said people really need to look and see, what value are you adding to the company? Is there an opportunity for you to jump ship and go elsewhere and contribute more and be on a better leadership team? It's not just about saying I deserve more because it's actually making a case for it and actually talking to leadership. And I've talked people through negotiations for salary, and it's worked. But you have to have reason. You have to have justification as to why you think you're worth more. It's not enough just to say, I'm worth more because I've been here 10 years. So what? You could have sucked for 10 years and just got by. You really need to be, especially in the competitiveness of the market right now, you really need to make sure that you have the justification as to why you think you're worth more and how you are contributing more to the company, because it's a cost-benefit analysis. If you don't make the company more than your salary, then you're losing the company money. Simple as that. So yeah. Are you contributing more to the company? And therefore you are not entitled, but you maybe deserve more.
Yeah, it's also contextual too, because if Nathan starts a business and it's a startup company and he hires me, I might have to deal with a little bit less pay because we're a startup company.
Yes.
And so I could easily say to Nathan, as my CEO, I could say, hey, you're not paying me what I'm worth. You're not paying me, the market value, for instance. And it's like, well, okay, but that's also kind of
you're right.
yeah,
You're right.
But that's the risk and reward. I mean, that's entrepreneurship 101 is you've got, going back to the original question, which is, why are CEOs vilified? At the end of the day, CEOs are the ones that went out there, they took the risk. They probably didn't take a paycheck for years and years and years, assuming they're the founding CEOs. They didn't take a paycheck for years and years to build something that ultimately could be profitable and ultimately could, sustain hiring people, and sometimes in the case of, big companies like Walmart or Amazon's a good example, to get to that point, that takes a lot of risk to get to that point. And it could have just as easily not worked out in their favor than, actually working out. And so when you get to that point and you're able to, you're making the big bucks, well, those big bucks didn't come for free. They came at a cost.
Right. And I think that also goes to a lot of us overestimate our ability.
Yeah.
Because I know this because I've sat at sports bars before and sat next to people who are like, well, I could do what that quarterback's doing. Oh, could you now? Then why aren't you doing it? Right?
Let's be honest. If it's the Browns quarterback, they're probably right.
Yeah, but I get the same thing when I'm talking to people about CEOs. Well, I could do that. Oh, could you now? Like, you could be the CEO of Apple.
Yeah, when realistically they don't have any context for what that actually looks like and that actually entails.
That's exactly right. And so it's just a matter of, I'm reminded of I was having kind of sort of pseudo this discussion with my grandparents a while back. They owned some restaurants and stuff like that. And they kind of said, we had two kinds of employees. We had the employee who needed to make more money, so they asked for more hours. And then we had the employee who needed to make more money, so they asked for a raise. And they said, once you know it, the person who asked for more hours typically was the person that actually ended up getting the raise.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's a matter of if you're willing to put in the work, typically, and you're right, Rob, sometimes cultures are just bad. But if the company's culture is worth working for, typically that level of hard work and dedication to the company and that loyalty to the company is going to be returned.
Well, and there's some interesting studies out there that talk about how on average people are willing to actually accept less of a salary when there is a good culture that they can get behind or work that they actually care about. And so, economics is all fine and good, but there's also an aspect of this to, your individual priorities and what you care about. You can work in a crappy environment that's just a paycheck, and maybe you don't think you're getting paid what you're worth, but then you could go next door to, a company that actually values your work and be willing to take less money because it fits your personal priorities and gives you that fulfillment that you care about.
Or maybe they offer a flexible schedule, or maybe they offer flexible hours to where you can work from home, spend more time with your family, spend more time with your kids. Like, we all value different things. And I'm sure that eventually we're going to get into the wage gap myth as far as between men and women and those like equal pay kind of things that go on. But the bottom line is that the economic decisions we make are not easily tied into a bow. We all make different economic decisions for different reasons. When I was single, I could care less about health insurance. I have 7 kids now, so I care a lot about health insurance, right? That is a higher economic value than to me. So do I take a pay cut but get that? So, there are a lot of different economic factors that I feel that people don't necessarily take into consideration. So we gonna wrap that up. Any last comments, Rob?
Yeah, just that you said it a minute ago. No matter what you do in economics, there are always unintended consequences. But again, going back to my general premise for any time you have a thought on someone making more, someone needs to be making less, can you say that you are willing to have somebody else do that for your salary? And if the answer is no, then you're being hypocritical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. All right. So we're going to transition to our next segment. I got a bone to pick with you, Rob. A bone to pick with you. And so we're going to call this next series of segments At Me, Bro.
Come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. Come at me, bro. Put your hands up, bro. Come here, bro. What do, bro? Come at me, bro.
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
And was I got a bone to pick with you, Rob?
All right.
So you posted something absolutely egregious on Facebook. Now, this isn't uncommon for you, but this one was particularly egregious. And so we're going to fight.
All right.
So you said that MASH is the #1 TV show all time.
Yep.
All time.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
And you actually believe that.
I do. Now, you got to let me have a little nuance.
All right, you're gonna have to explain yourself.
No. Here's where he walks it back. He's like, "Well,
I'm not gonna walk it back.
First of all, well, I'm gonna go into why you're completely wrong on all levels on this one, but I'm gonna let you have the first word here. So go ahead, at me, bro.
Fair enough. So I'm not going to nuance it at all. I'm actually just I'm gonna go all in.
he's gonna double down now."
So when I look at TV shows, and I have a top 5, and in that top 5 are shows like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad. But when I look at TV shows, there's several categories that go into what I think is the best show. When I look at MASH was on for 11 years, 256 episodes, 2 anniversary specials. It held the all-time highest viewing show for like 30 years after the season finale. It took like the 2006 Super Bowl to best like 106 million viewers simultaneously. MASH has a really high watchability or rewatchability for me. It's like Breaking Bad doesn't have that. So Breaking Bad is one of my favorite shows, but I can't just pick up and watch an episode of Breaking Bad because it's depressing as hell sometimes, depending on what episode you're on. So when I watch MASH, it's like, well, I can go to whatever season and watch it, and it's a good show. It's just a solid watch every time. There's not really a bad episode in the bunch.
All right.
It sounds to me like if you just switched out the name, it sounds to me like you're making an argument, and I would agree with this if this was the argument that you were making. It sounds like you're making an argument for why The Office is the best show of all time, and of course that would be my pick.
So, all right. So if you're talking about just watchability, right? So enjoyability, watchability, your bedtime's at 10 p.m. and it's 9:30. And you just have like a show to watch, right? And your argument is, I can throw on MASH, or I'm flipping through and it's on TV Land or whatever weird channel it's actually still syndicated on, because, that's exactly where we syndicate the best show ever, TV Land at 11:30 at night. But anyways, so that's essentially your argument. All right. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to talk about that. I disagree with that. I think that I would say the first 2 seasons fall under that. Maybe the 3rd season. After that, it gets preachy.
Why?
It's dramatic. And no, thank you.
All right.
Not my cup
now
of
hold
tea.
on. Now
They're at
anytime
war, sir.
All right, well, hold on. Anytime I debate someone, I don't like to let them go on a long tangent, long sentences. So why do you think? What was preachy about it?
It's obviously, well, first of all, they changed from the books, right? They changed the Hawkeye. Hawkeye in the books is actually a very conservative character. They changed it to a more liberal character, and it's because obviously it was taking place during Vietnam. And so it's about the Korean War, but they're trying to like make sentiments and statements about war generally because that's the audience they're speaking to at the time. I don't necessarily fault them for that, but it gets pretty preachy. Like, and that's the thing, like, is it a comedy or is it a drama, right? And so the biggest classification is a dramedy, which is in the middle of nowhere. I guess technically it's considered a sitcom when people think it's advantageous to put it as a sitcom. I wouldn't put it as a sitcom. I'd put it more of like a 30-minute drama, especially after like season 3. So that's another thing. Like, it's very difficult to classify what it is, right? So I don't think it's a sitcom, but let's say it's a sitcom. I don't even think it's in my top 3 all-time sitcoms. I would definitely put like The Office there. I would definitely put I Love Lucy as an all-timer.
Oh my!
You want to talk about
wow.
like rewatchability?
Okay.
Like even my kids love I Love Lucy. They're not digging into MASH and being like, "Oh, this is amazing."
Well, it's how they were parented. What do you want me to do? It's not my fault.
Hey, so Rob, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Is there a nostalgic aspect to it, you know, for you? I mean, I've come to find with a lot of these different conversations that, you know, where and when you grew up affects this a great deal. You know, I have like zero nostalgia for MASH, and so, you know, I can watch it and I can appreciate it, but I'm obviously not going to have the same kind of emotional response as you. Not saying it is that, but, you know, is that the case? Is nostalgia at least a factor?
I don't know. I don't think so, only because I grew up and my dad watched it a ton, and I didn't like it then. And it was only like after I was in my 20s, because I was born in 90, so it wrapped up 7 years before I was even born. So there was a period where I hated the show because it was, you know, my dad always had it on. I was like, this is boring. But I was, you know, 8. You know, so after I was in my 20s, I started picking it up. Or probably like 18, 19, 20. And I just thought it was really good. But I want to get back to what Nathan said. I need an example of the preachiness. I need an example.
You want like a specific like
Yes.
phrase?
So in season 4.
No. I don't need
10 minutes in,
No.
Hawkeye made a comment about.
No, I don't need it. I don't need the episode and season. I've watched every episode probably at least 10 times. I haven't seen anything that would be labeled preachy. And I'm pretty objective most of the time, unless it's MASH.
So he admits his bias.
That's awesome.
I mean, I think is Hawkeye portrayed as a Democrat? Yeah, but more of like the JFK-esque, not like the the far left that we see now. I mean, it was more of like a humanitarian than someone who was. I mean, it's very hard to have like a very far left leaning character who's also a womanizer. You know what I mean?
Well, not back then, but I guess.
Yeah.
I find it preachy.
All right.
Especially when it comes to like the war and the era it was in.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, it was only set during the Korean War, so I get it.
So Nathan, what is your comeback? What is your, you know, you mentioned some sitcoms, but just overall greatest TV series ever. What's your pick?
So my list, greatest TV. So I think it's difficult. Like, this is where I wanted to see kind of where you're coming from too, because it's different. How do you classify things, right? I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare The Office to The West Wing,
Sure.
right? So because they're completely different kind of genres, right? So for me though, like if I had to put everything together, I kind of have like a loose, I guess, top 5.
Okay.
And they tend to be more skewed towards dramas. And I think most people's top lists are skewed towards dramas just because they can do more than you can with a sitcom, right?
Yeah.
Now, earlier when we were talking about this, you said...
I'm sorry?
Earlier when we were talking about this, you said that The Bachelor was in there. Now, do you include all 5 seasons in the top 5?
First of all, I never said that. But if you want to go into reality TV as a separate category, I think there's definitely some good reality TV out there. Just like the mind-numbing... So what you do with your MASH watch is what I do with reality TV. Just like, hey, I'm going to shut off my brain now and watch TV.
DVR an episode of Bachelor in Paradise, and just kind of
Watch it on a loop, right?
Actually, the challenge is amazing. I'm with Bill Simmons. I think it should be a 5th professional sport in America, but that's sad. Anyway, so so my top 5. And I don't know if there's any like real particular order here, so I'm just gonna kind of throw it out. My number 1 is Breaking Bad, like just top to bottom. I think that show was a masterpiece. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 episodes in the entire run that you kind of say, oh, it's like a bottle episode. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't really tie in. I just think whether it's the writing, the production, or everything, I find it just a masterpiece. And I do put bonus points in there because it's on a channel that didn't rely on like gratuitous nudity to get a plot point over on. And so I think it's phenomenal. So that to me is number 1. In my no kind of particular order going past that, I would put The Wire up there. Groundbreaking. I'm not as high on The Sopranos as others. I don't really have them as has The Sopranos as a top 5. Some other people do. I actually put The West Wing up there. Probably a lot higher than others do. Mainly just because like my wife and I kind of go through West Wing like once every couple years, and we have for quite a while. Just binging that, find it very enjoyable. So that's kind of my very loose top. I think depending on how it ends, I think that Game of Thrones is up there for me as well. If you're doing like sitcoms, comedy, it's kind of different. My list is going to be very different from other people. I really love The Office. I'm not a big Seinfeld fan, and I know that puts me in like odds with like 90% of Americans or whatever. But I've never really gotten into it. I wasn't allowed to watch it growing up, and I never really did. So probably not one to really speak on that one.
I've never seen an episode, so I'm right there with you.
But that's kind of my loose top. Like if you said, hey, rattle off top 10, for me, I don't even think MASH makes my top 10.
That's fine. And if you were to ask me, and that's why I talk about the categories, what's the best written show I've ever watched? It's Breaking Bad, hands down. Breaking Bad is just it ended exactly how it should have ended. It did not end like Dexter, which was on a just not well. Breaking Bad is probably the best written TV show of all time, which I agree with 100%. It's my number 2 or number 3. But there's more that goes into what's my all-time than just that. Because Game of Thrones is similar. I think Game of Thrones is excellent, especially the latter seasons. But the but for me, there's just more into it than just the writing or just the, just the plot.
No, I got you. I mean, you actually have to halfway enjoy the show. I get that. It's like Lost. I really enjoyed Lost until like the last 2 seasons. And then the writers were like, yeah, we don't have to make any of this stuff pay off.
It's just a dream.
So Jeremiah, what are your top?
Yeah, I mean, so The Office is big with me. I mean, it's difficult for me because I've never been one to. Most shows don't really have a rewatchability for me, and so I can watch a show and I can just kind of brush it off and say, nah, that was a good show. But I don't really have a significant list of things that really stand out as far and away of the best, with the exception of shows that I like actually, rewatch. And those would be, sitcoms for me. So, The Office, Parks and Rec, big fan. But yeah, I mean, a little bit to Rob's point, something that I can, if it's on TV, if I'm flipping through the channels and it's on TV, I'm going to stop and watch it. Or if I have nothing else to watch and I really want to watch something, it's going to be an episode of The Office or Parks and Rec.
So what other shows are in your watch there, Rob?
Lately, it's not much. I've been, as far as like current shows you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm really into the Punisher series on Netflix. Thought that was really well done, as well as Daredevil. The other ones I'm not too keen on, but that's really it. I was really into the show Numbers that was on CBS a while back. That was kind of a neat show. Until Game of Thrones comes back next year, unless they revive Walter White, I'm probably cashing my chips in on the TV series, at least for now.
Have you watched Better Call Saul yet?
Yeah. I watched the first season. I liked it. I just haven't gone back to it.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I have not caught up on that one. There's so much stinking TV. It's like you go mad trying to keep up with it all. It's like, thank goodness I'm not a critic or something like that.
Right.
But like to the rewatchability thing, like I'm not much of a rewatch TV kind of person, with the exception of the West Wing, which Mandy and I go through on a regular basis. But I'm more of a rewatch movies kind of guy. That's kind of, hey, give me a good heist movie. Happy camper. I actually wish there was like a channel just for heist movies. I'd be all about that.
We'll have to debate our top 5 on another show for movies.
For movies? We definitely will. I love how we're going to have this big fight and we ended up not fighting too much.
Yeah, it's because you conceded pretty early that I was right, so it's it's all right.
I conceded.
That's what I heard.
Conceded no.
And then he brought in The Bachelor, and it's just like Nathan, we can't even trust your instincts here anymore.
Survivor is my reality TV show jam. About Survivor. Speaking of which, so I know this is kind of off topic, but my daughter wanted to watch American Idol, and just everything about that is horrible. The production value, like, I'm not saying that American Idol was great production value like in the past, but like it's very obvious it is not on the main like production vehicle for ABC, which is on ABC now, not Fox. Yeah. Right? It's it is wow.
I haven't even seen an episode. They changed the judges from when they were over on Fox, and
I watched one episode. It was actually last night, and it was on, and my kids were like, "American Idol, it's back." I don't know, whatever. So anyways, fine. We'll watch it for a little bit before you have to go to bed. And it was just, even the kids were like, "This is awful." It's like, yeah, it is.
So I started watching it with my wife, and I never really I couldn't get into it. It says something when the best comments, the quality comments, are coming from Luke Bryan. Like,
and it's not even close.
Come on, hey, let's go. Come on.
and it's not even close. Like, it's just
the most campy country music artist, if you can call him that. Just cheesy, and he's got the quality comments. He's the voice of reason, so to speak.
why can we not have drunk Paula Abdul back?
Right? Well, that's why I like the show when Harry Connick Jr. is on it, because he's an actual musician. So I kind of care about what he has to say, because he understands actual music theory. And Luke Bryan, I don't know. I mean, I don't know him, but I don't think he has that same level of expertise. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
Well, and so Lionel Richie's on there, and every time he talks, it's just, oh, when I did this and I met this star and I did this thing. It's like, okay, we get it. You've got a vast and storied musical career. We get it.
His comment last night, and this is no lie, his comment last night to one of the participants was, I'm going to tell you something that I've been singing about for years. I love you. I don't, and I'm not even joking. You should look up the clip. Oh my gosh. I was like, oh, wow. This is stellar TV. So anyways, that is not top 5. Not top 5. All right. So that is Appy Bro. And so we are going to go into our next segment. And we're going to kind of shift gears, as we are want to do on this thing, and talk a little bit about faith and reason. What's that all about? So, Jeremiah.
Yeah, so Nathan and I were talking about this the other day, actually kind of arguing back and forth in a family group chat. So we kind of took over the group chat, just him and I. But we thought it would be a good topic to bring. I think all three of us will bring an interesting perspective on this. Rob, you especially, you've done some apologetics work in the past, and so it started off with a meme, and once again, not a meme busters segment, but pretty darn close. So the meme is it's a meme posted by our atheist friends online, and it's a church sign that from a Baptist church, and it reads, "Reason is the greatest enemy that faith has." And then the meme subtitle says, "This should tell you something about Christians." And so I had actually spoke at my church on this topic about faith and reason, and do we need evidence for our faith? Is there a need for apologetics? Should we feel the need to defend our faith? And so I shared it to the group, and I said, this is what I was speaking about this past Sunday. So Nathan said it was probably fake. And I said possibly, but
the church sign.
Yeah, the church sign is probably fake. Yeah, not my sermon, although it could be argued. So Nathan's thought that the church sign was probably fake. But I said I've actually heard similar sentiments from Christians. And so this is what Nathan responded, and this is what I want to talk about. Nathan said, fair, but I think there's a balance. There's a way to make knowledge one's own God. But then again, faith, by its definition, is unable to be known. So if one's definition of reason is quote-unquote science, then I can see this being a thought. And so, we didn't get a chance to really flesh that out over text, but I wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts on that. I do want to push back on the idea that faith by its own definition is unable to be known. I don't think that that's a biblical understanding of faith, and we can get into that. But Rob, I mean, what do you think? Faith, reason, is it necessary? Do we need to defend our faith? Do we need evidence?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and I've had two radio debates and one public debate with an atheist on similar topics. I agree with you, Jeremiah, in that faith is not defined at a scholarly level, whether it's secular or from a religious theologian, as trusting in something with no evidence. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. The Stanford Dictionary defines faith as believing in something based on reason or justification. And we can play the dictionary game all day long and say, well, is it just faith without believing in something, or is it based on something? And I think as a Christian, if you have a belief in something, then you ought to justify it. And here's why. If you have the standard of saying, I believe in something, but I don't need to justify it, then that opens the door for people of differing ideologies to say the same thing, and it be as equally true for them as it is for you. So who's right? Who's right? It goes back to the same thing when we talk about moral ontology. Where does our morality come from? If I say it's me and it's my own opinion, and the Nazis say it's them, who's right? We can go back and forth on who's right all day, but there needs to be some objective standard that we look to. If not, then everything is all subjective. So the same thing with justification for faith and reason.
Yeah, so I'm going to defend myself, first of all. I am not saying that I agree with the sentiment. I said I understand it. I understand where it comes from. So gotten to get into some semantics, right? If one is, I don't want to necessarily look on this on like the broad theological level, because I don't think that's where it's applicable. I think it's applicable on more of the local level. And what do I mean by that? There are definitely times in the Bible and in our own lives where God asks us to do something that doesn't make sense to our understanding, right? And so bringing in like lean not on your own understanding. That there are some things that we cannot understand why God is acting or moving in a certain way. Now, we can have faith that he is moving in a way that is overall beneficial to the kingdom, and I think that's definitely able to be argued for. So I am not trying to say that we shouldn't argue for the faith. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to know God. I'm obviously for theology. I'm for apologetics. I'm big into that. But I also think that there are those who make knowledge their own God and their own idol, even above the God who they're intimating that they're actually following. I think there are a lot of quote unquote biblical scholars that aren't Christians. And there are a lot of even seminarians who aren't Christians, but they've made the educational piece their God and their idol and don't actually have faith in God. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the first sentiment. So I'll go ahead and kick that back to you guys, and then I got something else to add on to that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we could easily play the semantics game, but here's the thing, and here's where I think the practical also involves a little bit of digging and going a little bit deeper, and that is that where the semantics, so to speak, can actually be beneficial to the believer is that if, for instance, you, as a Christian, if you are incorrectly using, that church sign, for instance, to say, that's my definition of reason, and well, God sometimes calls us to do things that we don't fully understand, and we have to step out in faith. That's where the unbeliever can completely destroy a Christian if they don't have a solid foundation, where they can say, like, look at you, look at how, you don't even understand reason, logic, et cetera, et cetera. I think that we do need a solid foundation of understanding, number one, that if there even is such a thing as logic and reason, these are not physical attributes. And so the atheist, who also happens to be a naturalist and only believes in the physical material world, they have no way of explaining not even just, morality, but they don't have any way of understanding, the mind. They don't even have any way of defending why logic and reason works, because it's not a material thing. It's immaterial. And so we have to understand that these things ultimately, if we believe that God created everything, and I do, that these things ultimately come from God. And then my second point, and this isn't necessarily arguing with any of the other points that have been brought up, but just something that I've been thinking a great deal about, and this goes to, I think, Rob's original point, is that what separates us from every other religion on the planet? Well, if the Bible is true, and if Christianity is true, and if Jesus was an actual historical figure that died and rose again, that is what separates us from every other religion out there. That our faith is based on public events. It's based on public witness testimony, which is what the Gospels are. And those are very real evidential things that we can point to as a basis for our faith. And that kind of level of evidence is shaky at best when it comes to other religious backgrounds. And so the difference between us and every other religious background is it true? Every religion has conflicting claims. And so if Christianity is true, then there will be evidence to back it up. And maybe, God works in different ways. And so maybe, someone comes to faith out of an experience or out of a change in their life. I definitely don't mean to belittle that, because that's real and I've seen it happen. But there comes a point where you have to go deeper than that and be able to defend that faith deeper than just some experience you have, because ultimately that's not going to hold a candle to every other faith group that also has their own experiences that lead them to believe the way that they believe.
Well, I agree with that, right? And so I do think that there is a subset of Christian culture that says that doubt is sinful.
Correct.
And I don't think that that is beneficial to the body. And like I deal with youth group, I deal with kids, and it's okay to have questions, right? And we should have answers for those questions. So I don't want to have it seem that I'm opposed to that vein. My problem, though, is with those that just never seem to get an answer for any of their questions, regardless of the evidence that is actually there. And it's because they aren't able to. There does come a point where you have to have faith. And faith isn't this solely provable thing. It is kind of like logic or the mind. It's not all completely explainable or knowable yet. Like there are facets of medical science we just don't know yet. There are things about creation that we just don't know yet. And we're in the information age. There are just some things that are beyond the grasp of our knowledge spectrum. And God himself is in that spectrum. He's not fully knowable.
Right. And if he was, he wouldn't be a God worth worshiping.
Right. So, so going back to faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So there is some evidence, right? But it is not fully graspable. And I think that's the problem, is that a lot of atheists and agnostics, they put this impossible standard on faith they call it reason, and they don't apply that to any other part of their life. So how do I know this chair is going to hold me up? Because I've sat in it a million times, right? But I have, at the end of I have faith that it's actually going to support my weight. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't sit in it. Because we've all sat in a creaky chair and jumped up right away, right? So there are some things that we do put faith in, certain things that aren't 100% knowable. But then when it comes to this certain part of my life, and whether I'm going to believe in Jesus or whether I'm going to believe in God, I'm going to put this impossible standard of having to know absolutely every little detail thing. And in that case, that reason can be an enemy of quote unquote faith. Now, that's a really nuanced discussion, and we've talked about it before. Nuances should not go in memes, and nuances should not go on billboards or talking points, right? Because they're going to get misconstrued, and the people that you're trying to reach with your pithy quote are going to be recoiled. So this does not belong on a church sign, but the discussion does belong in the church.
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion that ultimately we're getting at is that there's this spectrum between kind of anti-intellectual aspects of the church and, to your point, people that are so hyper-intellectual that, or put another way, you've got on one extreme people that are so afraid of any type of doubt, and people that doubt is the ultimate goal. That the ultimate goal is not truth. The ultimate goal is I'm going to study so much to figure out every single tiny answer to every single doubt that I have. And in so the doubt is the ultimate goal, not the truth being the ultimate goal. So you've got these wide spectrums. And ultimately what we're getting at, I think, is that, somewhere in the middle, I think truth can be found. Somewhere in the middle, we can look at it and say that there are absolutely things that are unknowable, that we're not going to fully understand this side of heaven. But we also need to have a solid foundation for our faith and know why we believe what we believe, and not just put it into the drawer of faith and say, well, I just have faith, so therefore it's true.
Yeah, and we see this. I mean, we see this. It's not just in the church. We see this everywhere, right? Where a lot of people try to go one way or another when it comes to, and I'm going to speak specifically to education. Okay, so the need for education, or is there too much education, right? So, like for example, in business, is it necessary for everyone to have an MBA? No. Is it necessary? But should nobody get an MBA? No. Right? And there are two different camps in business when it comes to that, where MBAs are worthless or MBAs are everyone should have one. And I think, again, there's middle ground. And I think we see the same thing when it comes to seminaries and the intellectualism of the church. I think that we are called, all of us, to have an answer. Okay? But at some point, though, that if doubt is their main thing, then that's something that only God's going to be able to work in and humble them on that. And I'm comfortable with I don't know, I'm not God. I'm comfortable with that. Some people aren't comfortable with that. Some people are like, no, we have to have an answer, an answer, an answer, an answer. I'm okay. I'm comfortable in the tension. I'm at ease with the tension, because there is tension in the Bible. There are tension between these different concepts in the Bible, and I'm okay in the tension. I don't necessarily need to have the tension explained, but that's just kind of my personality. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the nuance, and I'm okay with I don't know. What if a What if a person in the Amazon never hears the gospel? Are they going to hell? I don't know. I mean, I could go into theory on it, and I could point you to some scriptures that kind of lend me one way or the other. But at the end of the day, I'm not God, and I don't know that person's heart. That's a purely hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I talked about this past Sunday related to that is, okay, you're comfortable living in that tension, and I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, probably because your strong foundational background and us both growing up in the church and growing up in godly families and being brought up, being able to ask those questions to our dad, who was a pastor. So I think there's a lot of reasons for that solid foundation, but ultimately it comes back to, I think, a solid foundation. But my issue is less with that. It's less with being willing to live in the tension and being willing to ultimately say, I don't know, to certain questions. I think that's probably a positive thing. But one of the things I talked about on Sunday was, okay, I'm having an argument with an atheist, say, or an atheist comes to me and he makes a wild claim, and I make the decision, well, I'm comfortable, maybe I don't know the answer, well, I'm comfortable living in that tension, and so I'm not going to answer him. Well, we've talked about this in the past with, discourse on social media. Sometimes it's less about the actual conversation that's happening, and it's more about the peripheral conversations or the people, the audience that's looking on in. And so that's one of my biggest issues is for the person that grew up in the church and they're comfortable with, God said it and I believe it, so that settles it. That's great. And I think that there's a lot of grace that's been given in your life that allows you to have that level of faith. But when a challenge is brought to you and your daughter or your son or someone in your Sunday school class or your neighbor or someone else at your church or just in your life is looking on and they have very serious questions about their faith, and you weren't willing to or weren't able to give that answer when those challenges were brought up, maybe your faith is perfectly strong after that, but what about the other people that are listening? And that was kind of my overall, point is, hey, there's always someone listening. And for those of us in this room that have children, our children are always listening.
Always.
And so we might be able to be comfortable living in that tension, but we also need to be able to have those conversations with our kids and ultimately any audience that's, looking to us for answers.
That's good. Rob?
Yeah, I think those are all good things. I agree that when, like for example, I was in a public debate and during the Q&A section, the atheist had asked me a question and I didn't know the answer. Now I could have done two things. I could have made something up or talked around it, which I've seen people do, but I just said, I honestly, I don't know. I said, I don't know your answer. I don't know the answer to your question you're asking, but I can look it up and we can talk about it later. And that was that. And I did. And sure enough, he actually came back to my house after the debate and we talked about it more, and I was able to look up some things to make sure I was given the right numbers and the right data and so forth. It's just such a big thing. It's being honest. I mean, I don't know all the answers to all the questions that atheists ask. You just don't. But that doesn't mean you can't learn every time there's an objection. Now, there's a difference between people carpet bombing and asking question after question after question just to try and trip you up or cause doubt, and then people who are actually authentically looking for answers, and you can tell who those people are.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And ignorance is not so. Like I said, I'm comfortable in the tension as far as for me. If I don't know something, I'm comfortable in that not knowing it. But to Jeremiah's point, ignorance isn't an excuse. More importantly, intellectual laziness isn't an excuse.
Right.
If you have somebody who's coming with answers, like for example, if my child were to come to me with the answer, I would find something to better suit that as far as actual church doctrine on it. So where that question wouldn't bother me, not knowing the answer to that question for my child would bother me. And I think to Jeremiah's point, and this part I completely agree with, too many people in the church, it doesn't bother.
Right. Or they give the answer that is simply, well, the Bible said it's that way. And so we just have to believe it. Or, faith, we just have faith that that's true. And that is the entire, I guess that's my entire point, is that is wholly insufficient when you have legitimate seekers, not just the atheist that's throwing arrow after arrow after arrow at you just to trip you up, to Rob's point. But when you've got someone who's seeking and the only advice you have to give them is, it'll all work out.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's in my
Not
opinion,
helpful.
that's not helpful. It's not good enough.
Not helpful. And it's actually, and it's the opposite of helpful. It's hurtful.
Yeah.
It hurts. And I think that's why we have very clear instructions that we need to have an answer ready. We need to be able to answer it. And, so for those listening, sometimes it's just talking about your personal testimony as well. And I think that's another thing too. We really don't have time to really delve into it, but that's when it comes to talking about our faith, I think too often, and this is a critique of some apologists. Too often we try to keep our heads in the clouds and in a book when someone's really wanting to delve into the relationship.
Yeah.
And people that are seeking aren't necessarily asking for a sermon, and they aren't necessarily asking for a lecture in the university setting type lecture. They're asking for that relationship. They're asking for a friend. And so we got to be aware of that too. And part of offering that answer is sometimes talking about a personal testimony. And, hey, this is what God's done in my life. And, some of what God's done in my life is frankly unexplainable, because guess what? I didn't deserve any of it. But it's been miraculous, and it's been in my life, and here's where it's worked in my life. And this is what I've seen. And I don't know the answer to that specific question you have, but you know what? Let's find it together. And I think sometimes we look at witnessing as almost a confrontational, and this goes not just for witnessing, this goes for any kind of debate we have. I think we look at discourse as a confrontational face-to-face encounter, when sometimes it should be a relational side shoulder-to-shoulder encounter where we're figuring this out together. And we're in the same fight, we're in it together. So that would be my piece of advice. Are you looking at these encounters in your life as face-to-face confrontational type encounters? Or are we looking at them as relational encounters, shoulder to shoulder? And that could be a powerful mindset change for some people that are listening. All right. So, Jeremiah, you had a long day today.
That's right.
And you were driving here and there and everywhere, and rolled up in here. We're recording extremely late. We record on Tuesday nights. We were recording late here. And I've been up since I don't even remember what time I got up this morning. It's been that far away. But you know what kept me in the game today?
What's that, Nathan?
Strike Force Energy. Let me tell you, I actually was able to try it. So I actually tried it. So I'm not just making this up, but it is as great as you guys spoke on the last episode, I gotta say. So my favorite flavors are orange and grape. Comes in a lot of different flavors. And what Jeremiah was saying about it not being the clumpy thing. So I get up in the morning. I teach English as a second language to Chinese kids. So I teach it kind of over Skype. And so I'm up at 4:30, 5 a.m., and I have to be bright and chipper and cheery. And I love the fact that I can roll in, put my cup in the water dispenser, get some water, and just squirt the packet down. It kind of mixes itself, and it's good to go. I don't have to find a spoon. It's just in a nice little aluminum packet. The liquid mixes perfectly. It's great. And, I was doing sugar-free Red Bulls in the morning. And I tell you what, by my third class, I would start crashing. Not so with Strikeforce Energy. Great product, great veteran-owned company. In this episode, we are proud to have brought to you by Strikeforce Energy. You can use our coupon code MAP for 20% off all orders at StrikeForceEnergy.com. Again, that's StrikeForceEnergy.com. Use our coupon code MAP, stands for money and power, for 20% off all orders. And we will not ask Rob to do math because he is bad at it.
Yeah, at least on the spot.
Guys, that is not nice. You make one mistake.
It's one mistake that happened very early on. If people don't, if you didn't get a chance to read or hear it, I'm pretty sure it was in the pilot episode.
I mean, we're on episode 2, so to find early on.
It's not a giant catalog.
50 episodes ago.
I'm pretty sure it was in episode 0. But yeah, I mean, so just one mistake, but it may just be a mistake that haunts you forever, Rob.
Yeah, well, I'm not the financial consultant, but I caught it. All right, so we actually got some listener feedback from people not named Kevin Small. So that's pretty exciting. But before we get into listener feedback, Jeremiah, where can people contact us, like our friend Tony Vance?
Yeah, so you can find us at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We got all those set up, and we are available to get feedback in all of those locations. So send us your comments, send us your memes you want us to bust, send us your topics that you want us to discuss. Unintentional rhyme there. But yeah, hit us up at Money Power Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We'd love to hear from you.
And it's early, so if you reach out to us, it's pretty much a guarantee that you are going to get a shout out in the episode. We did get some listener feedback in the form of a video, so we have the audio clip. Can you roll that, Rob?
You know what happened the last time they mixed finance, politics, and religion? Well, the French Revolution. Well, anyways, I enjoy money and power. Both money and power. I enjoy it. I get a lot out of it. Because I like money. I like power. Oh, and I like you guys. Just listener feedback. You got somebody else listening besides Kevin Small. Thank you. This is Tony Van.
First of all, I don't even know what to say. You can't see the video, but Tony's beard game is on point. It's getting much better these days. I don't know if he's leaning reformed or what's going on. I don't know if he changed his theology recently or what's happening.
No, I know what happened. His wife got a hold of him. That's exactly what happened. Anytime we improve our looks.
That's what it is. But yeah, thank you, Tony, for the video and for taking the time to record that. When you said you like money and power, I don't know if you're talking about the show or just in general. It's like more money, more power, whatever you like.
Yeah, we'll deliver. Well, probably not the money.
Or the power.
Yeah, likely. Fail on both of them.
We can deliver pizza.
Couple other bits of feedback from some listeners. We had David on Twitter said, "I'll listen to the pilot. My thoughts later." And then he tweeted at us again a little bit later and said, "Nice first effort. Earned a second listen." So there you go. I haven't heard from him since. So we may have lost him. But there you go. So got a couple other pieces of feedback. Jacob Hatcher on related to our meme buster meme, where we were talking about the differences between kind of the economics of yesteryear and being able to afford housing and utilities on one income versus today, and what that looks like. Jacob says, was able to listen last night on my way home from Nashville. What? Sorry, that was unintentional. On my way home from Nashville, thoughts specifically on the meme buster portion. I work for Kroger and have since I was 15. Kroger pays employees anywhere from just above minimum wage all the way to executives making astronomical amounts. Can any two of my employees married making the entry level pay live off of that? Probably not. However, there are positions at the store level that require no level of education whatsoever, where two people could make nearly $100,000 a year. I'm a firm believer in proof positive that working hard and knowing how to get along with people will get you places. And generally speaking, in most cases, it's as easy as getting after it and making things happen. I think that ties in a lot of things we've talked about over the past couple episodes.
All right. So keep that listener feedback coming. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So we've come to the end. Parting shots.
So I'll go first. This is actually a recommendation this week. I've been listening to a new podcast called This Is War. It's by the Wondery Podcast Network. There's only about 5 episodes. They're only about 5 episodes in, so it's still pretty early. But I've really enjoyed the first 5 episodes. Basically, it tells the stories of veterans and service members who served overseas in various conflicts over the last 15, 16 years, and tells their stories of not only while they were overseas and in wartime, but also transitioning back home. It's really interesting perspective. A couple things I really like about it. Number one, it's not political. It doesn't get into, arguments of, whether we should have even been in the wars or not, or that thing. It really just talks about their stories and being in it. And, we're not necessarily conditioned for war as human beings. And so, when you see great tragedies, it can have, it's going to affect different people in different ways, and how they cope with that, not only overseas, but transitioning back home. And so I really appreciated that, just good perspective on that. But the other thing is, a lot of times we hear about, the Iraq War. We hear about, different conflicts from, 2001 to 2006. And then we don't really hear much more than that. Well, this has told stories anywhere from 2001 to, even within the last couple years. And so it's a good reminder that, we still have service members serving overseas, and we're still out there fighting. And so, yeah, I really, really appreciate that. So the podcast is called This Is War. It's one thing I'm really liking.
All right. Thanks for that. Rob.
I got nothing.
Nothing?
No, I'm just kidding. I actually have a recommendation as well. I just finished a book called The Rooster Bar. Now, The Rooster Bar is a very interesting book. There's some finance, there's some college, there is some, it's a John Grisham book, so it's like a legal issue. But the main premise of the book is that there's these students who are taken advantage of by this law school. They were promised salaries, and the law school published salaries because the guy who owned the law school hired students from that school to make the salaries look better to get more people to go to the school. So it's a super book on corruption in law schools and publicly traded colleges. So super good read. Check it out. Oh, also, for all the people that are tweeting me and direct messaging me about their, this multi-level marketing firm that they'd like me to join, stop it. It's not funny anymore.
Just stop right now. All right. So I got a couple things here. So first, I've been getting a lot of these in my Facebook feed, and I would like people to stop. That's this America versus Facebook thing. And so it's a bunch of things like, oh, how are the roads in America compared to the roads in Germany? Or, hey, America versus shoes at home. We may want to reconsider wearing shoes inside our homes. I would not like to reconsider that. I don't care what other country doesn't wear shoes in their home. Oh, subways in Tokyo versus a subway in New York City. Breakfast in America versus breakfast in Europe, which, by the way, okay, so this breakfast in America thing. First of all, I have breakfast every morning, most of the time. I can't remember the last time I had a donut, right? And so they make it out. So just because an option exists inside the entire United States to have for breakfast doesn't mean that we're actually having this for breakfast every morning. We could have a delightful crepe and a espresso and a bagel with cream cheese just as much as freaking Europe. All right. So
Nathan, you're trying to tell me that you don't polish off, 12 dozen Krispy Kremes every single morning like I do?
12 dozen? Like 144?
Can't do that anymore. I wish. So it's like America versus Taiwan, recycling. America versus Germany, driving. We don't have to be versus. There's no versus here. Like, we just, whatever.
But my thing is, too, is it possible that there's like one or two things that these other countries have, some semblance of, better than America? Sure. But you've picked out the supposedly best thing, and they're things that aren't that great. Still they're not that great.
Yeah, well, it's like America versus Japan, toilets. All right, public bathrooms in Japan put America to shame. I believe you have to pay for the public bathrooms in Japan. Maybe that's why they're better. But also the picture is of a woman who is obviously drunk, puking into a toilet versus a happy Japanese girl smiling, sitting on the commode. Like, I get it. Like, oh.
Cause and effect, Nathan. Cause and effect.
I was, whatever. I can't even sometimes. It's like driving. Okay, so the driving ones versus Germany. Like, some places there aren't any speed limits. Ooh, have you been to Montana? Like, there are places in the West where you can go miles and miles and there are no accidents, right? But like, yeah, we get it. The traffic in LA sucks, but there's more to America than just these little snippets where obviously these millennial hipsters live. Like, there is more to America than outside Brooklyn, which I'm sure this company probably exists from. So, America versus I hate you. That's my parting shot. So, I would like to make an announcement. So, we obviously are kicking off a lot of these episodes. We are in the month of July. Going to be doing a leadership series for the podcast. So we're going to talk about Rob's entrepreneurship Hall of Fame. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about different things you can do in leadership. And so it's going to be kind of focused around that. So pretty excited about that. So you can mark your calendars. And if you decide not to listen to us between now and then, pick it up on July 5th for the first of our leadership month. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, we're looking at you, David, on Twitter.
Yeah, David on Twitter. Don't let us down. Or if you do let us down, don't let us down in July, because we need that. But the feedback's been great from people who have listened. And also, we actually have subscribers and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
We're not even hitting the low-hanging fruit at this point, because I know for a fact my wife isn't subscribed. So it's like, the people that should be subscribing are not. So besides Kevin Small and Tony Vance, if you're out there and you subscribed, we really appreciate you.
I am fairly confident that my wife is not subscribing. Rob, is your wife subscribing to the podcast?
She is.
Well, it's a good baseball average. 3.33.
That's not terrible.
Did you take her phone and subscribe her?
Maybe.
I I was about to say, because that's how I got my wife to like the Facebook page.
My wife liked the Facebook page on her own, so I'll give her props for that. So until next time, for Rob Johnson, Jeremiah Martin, I am Nathan Martin, and thank you for listening to Money and Power.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard.